Good morning, everybody. This is the OSG We Help Grow Cybersecurity podcast with Adam Gordon
Fred Cohen.
And that would be Dr. Fred Cohen to everybody out
Dr.
there.
Fred. Just like
Fred.
Dr. John. I'm like a rock and roll star. Okay.
I was thinking kind of like, it sounded a little like Mr. Green Jeans. Remember him?
Mr. Green, you're talking about
1960s television.
I mean, so I do remember, but I don't recall him being that enthusiastic, but I believe you.
Okay.
So
the
what are we
subject
talking about today?
We are talking about email etiquette.
Okay.
Something that is apparently near and dear to your heart.
It is. And since you haven't shared your screen yet, I'm going to share mine and tell you a tale of two email situations. So I'm going to go over to here, and this is support from Quill, which is a company that does payment transfers for other companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to download the screenshot because it's not important. The important thing is we see here a series of replies back and forth with regard to a request. On the site, I pushed the button that says help, and it said, tell us what it's about. It included automatically the URL that was at issue. And I just put in a little message, which was probably too brief, but that's okay. And hey, I'm Alan, thanks for reaching out. We need a little bit more information, and blah, blah, blah. And then, so I sent them a picture, a screenshot, and a couple of other words. Here's the problem. And so he says, oh, well, no problem. There should be a confirm button that you should press. And, if that's grayed out, and I said, that's grayed out. I said, if that's grayed out, there should be a tick box next to the image, which I couldn't see until he told me it was there. So thanks for getting back with the screenshot. I understand you wanted to confirm information for blah, blah, blah. Okay, now this whole sequence takes place. It finished, that is, I finished and basically sent back an email saying thank you at 7:03 a.m. Pacific time today. The process started at 6:31 a.m. Pacific time today. So we're talking about, 6, 7, 8 email exchanges all happened in 20 minutes, something like that. And issue resolved, no problem, done. We're good to go. Okay. So that's what I consider to be a good job of servicing that. And I told them that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I brought that up today was because of Crunchbase. And Crunchbase, I had a support experience with them.
Oh, by the way, and for everybody listening, you should know that Crunchbase is not a supporter of this podcast.
Well, and nor are they likely to be.
I suspect after this.
So on December 12th, I said I went to their site and they said, basically, you can get additional, content for additional fees. Contact us. Click here to contact. So I click here to contact them, and I ask a question. And this was on December 6th that I asked my question. They don't include my question. That's right. December 10th, they got back to me. Okay. Now, my question was basically, I want to pay you more money and buy something bigger. Can you tell me how much it costs? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
To which their answer was, oh, well, let's have a conversation with you. So I said, please provide the costs and other requirements of such a license. And then they got back to me, within, in that case, an hour. No price. Okay. So why can you not tell me the pricing? I just want to be able to download, more than 100 items, blah, blah, blah. Okay. This is now the next day. We're talking about at 11:30 from 3:30 the previous day. So, 10 hours later. In this case, $5,000 to $90,000. That's the range. Okay. So I say,
for budgetary purposes only.
Well, and I say, what for the 5,000? Blah 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 blah. Is this the deal? Correct? Question mark. because I have no idea. Price has a high variance. Thank you for telling me that 5,000 to 90,000 is a high variance. So 1142. Well, I'm not the pricing team. It's difficult to confirm any price. Well, bloody hell! I asked you, 5 days ago for a price, and now you tell me. And can't I set up a specialist? Can't we have a call? No, I just want to know the price. Really. How about email? Okay. My colleague Mike, blah 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 blah. All right. So that was December 11th at 5 p.m.
So this has now already gone on for 6 days?
Well, December 11th from December 6th.
So 5 days.
5 days.
5 days, and all you're asking to do is to spend more money with them, and they're making it hard.
Right. So now Mike gets in touch with me, and in 4 email exchanges in the period of about 20 minutes, got my questions answered, done. Okay?
Okay.
So this is just a bad process. This is a 5-day delay for what should be a 15-minute answer. When somebody says, I want to send more money to your help desk, their answer should be either, here's the price list, or here's the person that can definitively answer your questions, and that person should come back pretty quickly saying, oh, let's take your money, and answer the question. So that's what I consider a range of bad support through good support. And I got to tell you, I'm anxious to not work with these guys. And I have, now the problem is that their price is a lot better than the alternatives. So I might end up working with them, but my expectation of service is, I'm not going to get much.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is part of what I see as a problem with the whole concept of the customer journey. They'd mapped out your journey already, but it wasn't the journey you wanted to take.
Yeah, and I'm not going on their
journey down their support paths.
Yeah.
There's no reason they can't build a support system that would allow you to do that.
So you haven't popped up another page, so I'm going to pop up one of your pages, but really that's nothing to do with email. So why don't you take me to an email example?
Well, I've got a couple of websites here that will give us a little bit of information.
All right, so I'm going to stop my share and you can start yours.
Okay.
I dislike having no video up. This black background with no video just is not very happy. But hopefully you're bringing one up soon.
That'll be it right here.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
So here's what Marketing Profs, which is a company that I've read their blogs and stuff for a long time. And I find them generally accurate and when reporting data, unbiased. And so this is what their tests say, just in terms of the subject line of the email. The highest open rates you get with subject lines that are 6 to 10 words.
Okay, and it drops down. Now hang on, I'll go back up to the top. Let's just look at the numbers. So 6 to 10 had 21%, 5 or fewer 16, and 11 to and more 14. So you can basically get another 20 to 40% improvement by keeping it 6 to 10.
Yeah. Now, here's where I question this is, what are they actually measuring here? Because if you look at all of the emails, right, 0 to 5, probably the only people sending you a 0 to 5 word title are either spam, which you're going to ignore, or somebody that and you'll probably open that. So I kind of wonder about that particular number, but I think the rest of it is pretty good.
Hang on, before you go on from there.
Yeah.
Spammers are not dumb.
No.
So they're going to increase it to 6 to 10 now that you told them to.
Because they didn't know this before.
Yeah. If they didn't know it before, you can, this assumes that they're listening to our podcast. Those spammers of the world. If you really want to make money, you got to listen to our wait a minute. Might not be the best approach, especially for the anti-spam industry that is,
well, as
security.
Everybody in marketing says it depends on your audience. So I'm going to pop up another web page here for a second. Now, this is the programmer's guide to email. This is a site that I found called Iridakos, and this came up early on a Google search just for email etiquette, for instance. And I thought this was interesting because it shows an example how a particular group wants their particular emails structured. So it started me thinking about, maybe there's not just a single monolithic rule for email. Maybe different people have different sets of people have different rules for how they like their email done.
All right, so this one is the direct technical, here's a situation thing.
Right.
And what's the after they added their emphasis version? Okay.
And I like what they say a lot.
Yeah, I don't like what they emphasized.
Yes. Well, the blah, blah, blah in particular, but.
No, it's not the blah, blah. No, that's not it. It's what they've emphasized the details. What I would have emphasized would be many logs, last few days, not normal.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe the problem, who cares? I've read mine issue 455. That's nothing to emphasize, right? So to me, if you're going to do that kind of emphasis, you're going to want to emphasize one meme, right? Because if I'm going to look at the details of this email, I best know that I want to. And if I want to, I will look. And if I don't want to, I won't look. So all that additional boldface just distracts me from what the key issue is, right?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. So you would, in fact, structure this quite differently. You think this is less effective than these guys are saying?
Well, it might be more effective than the one above.
Yes.
At something, but I don't know at what, right?
And at OSG, we believe better is good.
Well, yeah, right. No. So hello
only if it's better enough. Okay.
So all right. So let's talk. Hello all. Why do you say hello to all? Okay. Stop it. Either say all : or just don't say it, because what does hello have to do with it? It's not like it's a personal thing here, right? If it's hi John, and I'm having a friendly communication, but once I'm working with John, it's John, or maybe not even John, right? Because He knows it's me, he knows it's him. We're having a conversation here. But the more critical thing is, especially for this kind of a dynamic thing, presumably within some sort of a support group, right? Mm-hmm. Internal, blah, blah, blah. What I would do would be the first line, or maybe the subject line would be abnormal logs, maybe for blah, blah, if blah, blah was important. Abnormal logs.
Well, I think their point here, Fred, is that it's just highlight the important stuff. So this is just an example. I don't think they're necessarily saying that this is necessarily the important stuff, but that if this was, you should highlight it.
Oh, well, in that case, use specific dates instead of yesterday, tomorrow, and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I send out reminder emails. Mm-hmm. And I send them out the day before something, and I say, reminder of our meeting tomorrow, blah, 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 right? Now, sometimes I say our meeting tomorrow and then left paren Thursday, or THU, right paren. But the reason I do that is not so much because they won't get it today, but because I'll send them out late in the day, and there will be people on the list for that particular message where it's actually tomorrow already. So I try not to confuse them, but if there are people within the 3 US time zones, I'm sending it in the morning, I'll say tomorrow. And it's usually a calendar reminder. So they have the calendar reminder. I'm just giving the 24-hour notice.
So what I brought up here now is this is a Google search for email etiquette, and I limited the search to the last 24 hours. So this is what Google has come up with in the last 24 hours. And this is the one particularly, I haven't opened this yet. So we're going to see what are the top 5 or is it 10 rules of email?
Okay, so number one, number one etiquette is don't tell me it's 5 when it's 10.
Yeah.
I don't like being lied to.
That's
period.
right.
If you give me inconsistency, I'm going to go away.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, don't be sloppy in an attempt to be friendly. Well, okay, there's a bad web page. It covers up the content while you're trying to read it.
Okay,
Moves it around while you're trying to read it. I hate that. Right? These things where they, so what value is that graphic to this content?
None whatsoever.
Thank you. It shouldn't be there. Okay.
No. They put it in because somebody said, well, you need to break up this text. And
yeah, no, I don't actually.
Text.
And
this goes back to what I talked about.
Number one, the most important one?
What's that?
Is the first commandment the most important one?
I have no idea. Well, I would assume that these guys ordered them as this is number 1, that they think it's the most important.
No, I think what they did was they said, oh, we're going to write an article. It's going to get some attention. Let's get to 10 of these things. Let's write them down. They wrote them down, and whatever order they came in, somebody filled it in. That was it. So watch your grammar. Oh, grammar and spelling and punctuation is more important than avoid talking aimlessly.
Yes.
I don't think so.
Here's the other one that I hate, number 5. Keep your emails organized.
What does that have to do with this?
Why? First of all, why? I always question the guys who want to go to inbox 0 every day. This is why we have search. Why do you have to keep your emails organized?
Very important to context.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's not important to content at all.
Well, there's another thing going on here, okay? And that is with cell phones in particular, but other similar mobile devices, the email system doesn't really allow you to effectively answer parts of an email one after another after another. So whereas on a desktop or something like Thunderbird or something like that, or Outlook, you can sit there on a desktop and you can edit, so you can sort of start, element by element. They have 5 things they're addressing. There's increasing indentation associated with reply sequences. You can replace portions of it with ... to get to the point you're addressing, address that, and go through the email. So this is a whole style of communication in email that is not text messaging.
Right.
So when people do this on their phones, they have a tendency to text message, which also means there's a tendency in those quick reply sequences to not address what's all the way down in your email, or to not address more than 1 or 2 things if there are 5 issues.
Right.
So I can certainly see that. But different horses for different courses, right? Horses for courses. All right, so deliver requests and resending receipts. Okay, I'm sorry. See number 7 there?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, this is not advice. Reply to emails promptly is something you should do. Delivery requests and sending receipts is nothing. It's just a comment on some part of the space, okay? So if they could say, don't send, okay, that would be one thing, right? But they didn't say that. There aren't many people who appreciate these, so give them a miss. What a huge mistake. Okay, so I send in an invoice on a purchase order, and I hear nothing back, okay? This is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. This is underway right now, right? They send me a purchase order via email. They indicate reply to this address with the invoice, put this information, of 2 or 3 things you have to do. So I do those things, and I send it back to that email address. I get nothing back. Radio silence, okay? So 2 days later, having heard no confirmation or any other information back, I send an email to the other email address, the one that sent it to me, carbon copy of the help desk, saying, haven't heard back, have you received it? Okay, so it's now, at this point, it's the 12th. I did this, now 10 days ago. And just today, we figured out that there was a form they needed to fill out. So they sent me the form, I filled it out, I sent it back to them. No, radio silence again, right? That's complete BS. If you're communicating with somebody, you need to close the loops, right?
Yes.
It's plan, do, check, act. Any decent management process is going to confirm that the thing you were trying to get done got done with a timely response sequence so that it doesn't just drop on the floor and get lost or end up in somebody's spam box and get ignored. All right? This is business emails. Obviously, it's not you and me just chatting.
Yes. Yes, this is, and that's a lack of process on their part, is that, something's broken. If I was that big company and I was a marketer at that big company, that kind of story would really bother me. Because, if you're a big brand like that, you want to be treating your vendors as well as you treat your customers, because they're probably a lot the same.
Well, maybe. So the other ones, there are lots of critiques here. The last one, avoid sending an email for discussions that should be better done face-to-face. Poorly stated, but really should be the first one.
Yes.
Which is to say, message, content, and appeal. There are different venues for communicating different things.
Yes.
So the number one issue, in my opinion, is what you should use email for and what you should not use email for.
And what do you think you should use email for?
Aha. Well, you're taking me towards the scroll, man. So there are different things different venues you use for different kinds of communication, right?
Okay.
So, for example, a letter, right? Letters are good when establishing justification or to get a letter back, or when interruption is dangerous. Okay?
Okay.
Face-to-face is better when presence brings regard or respect. Visual indicators will help, or more or less may be desired, right? It's a matter of in the real time. So we now have more mechanisms than we had when the original work was done back in the 1960s. But so the issues here surround whether it's real time, whether the interaction is in immediately adaptive, whether you want to be interrupted or not, or be able to be interrupted or not, how much you have to say, the need for relevant attachments, and then whether it's a business communication, like functional, right? Business communication. I refer to these things typically as actuarial, just actions you need to undertake to get a mechanism to work through the process, versus trying to communicate with a human being as if you were a human being.
Mm-hmm.
So email is quite good for, I want a record of it. I want, date and timestamps. I want to be able to quote other things back and forth. It's very good for.
Mm-hmm.
Attachments. Email is just way better for sending, documents alongside this than any of this other crap where you upload stuff.
Yep. Don't
send me a 40, megabyte file in email.
I made that mistake once.
Well, it happens.
Yeah.
Well, but a lot of this has to do with not using compressed formats. People in advertising, there's a tendency to have beautiful content. And so you produce a PDF file that's, 40 gigs and try and send it in email to, 800 people. Insane, right? The same content, lower resolution, so that picture looks just great on a phone or a normal screen, but if you blow it up and zoom in, you'll see dots, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Those things, typically you get them, in under a PDF 10 pages, you get it under a megabyte pretty easily without sacrificing substantial elements of content. And another one is this idea of compressing things in email. So different systems do compression and decompression differently, and you're counting on them having tools. Usually you're counting on them having the same tools as you. People send doc and docx and PDF and PDF is okay, all sorts of other tools. PDF is sort of the universal format that everybody has, that essentially all browsers and email systems have, for being able to see the imagery as created. You got to be careful. You might want to send the fonts along, depending, because there are issues with font selection. But generally, PDF works better than anything else. Document files, PDFs, PowerPoints. These big PowerPoints. They don't present well. You don't see what you're trying to show them, and they take too much space. And then for people that use other formats, not everybody has PDF loaded on their cell phone. Sorry, they do usually PDF. Many people don't have PowerPoint on their cell phone.
No.
So they're ending up running it through some other mechanism, and then try and look at a slide deck on a cell phone. And I've done this, but people, depending on what you've put on the slide deck, they may have some high dense thing that you're supposed to look at, and good God, I'm on my cell phone grinding, trying to look at your diagram. Not going to happen, right? I'll get into that. So you got to consider, what the purpose is of the recipient, and where they're going to be, and what they're going to see, and how they're going to perceive it, and what action you're trying to get them to take. Right?
Right.
So all of this communication, at the end of the day, is about behavior.
Yes. We're back to influence.
Well, yeah, but yes, influence, but behavior, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, you don't know what's in somebody else's mind, but you do know how they behave.
Yes.
So, you see some part of how they behave.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to get them to buy something, you're trying to get them over the action threshold, right? So that's the behavior you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to get them to pay an invoice, it's a different thing. If you're trying to get them to give you a purchase order, a different thing. So, sort of customizing your message, the content, the form, the format, the appeal, and so forth, and the personality you associate with it, all presumably part of your genuine person, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you need to understand who you're communicating with and what behavior you want out of them in order to effectively communicate.
Yes. Yes. And unless you're really familiar with the person, there's a whole mode of communication that works better than others. If you're trying to get information across, it helps to have a little bit of narrative along with it, because people don't respond well to bullet points unless that's all you want to say. But
I think
there's
you
a
need to know your
transactional piece to it, but there's also a non-transactional piece to it where you're creating the context that you want to create.
We should talk a little bit about this, because
sure.
So one person I work with, he's a top executive and very busy and all that. If you send him more content than, let's say, 7 to 10 words in a bullet point, you'll get no response to that bullet point.
Mm-hmm.
If you send him more than 3 or 4 bullet points, you'll get no response to it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So you're limited to 3 or 4 bullet points. Get to your point. Tell me what you want. If you want to have a call, say, let's have a call when works for you. Boom. He'll say 10 o'clock Tuesday. Great. Done. Okay. So in that kind of communication, knowing that person, knowing how they work, he's doing everything on his cell phone.
Right.
Via email on his cell phone.
Right.
Then that's just what you need to expect. There's a completely different thing in this particular environment that's different from your typical corporate environment. In a typical corporate environment, when you're communicating with somebody that's higher up, that communication style is, you really need to think about what you're saying, especially if they're much higher. If they're one level higher, you might have a normal interaction. If they're far higher, you want to temper it and slow it down. You want to not actually say what you're trying to say, but you want them to get the message, right? And
mm-hmm.
and you're looking at a long-term strategic objective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And completely different if you're on top talking to somebody down below.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're on top talking to somebody below, you can basically give orders, right? This is about position and power, right?
Yeah.
And if you're talking to a peer in a different organization, then there's the potential that this affects the organization above you, right? So what you're trying to do sort of is get friendly with the knight on the other side, right? So two knights talking to each other in different fiefdoms that are currently allied, or something like that. You can talk to each other, but you got to be careful, right? And so there's a lot of complexity. If you're from outside an organization and you're talking to somebody inside an organization, then you're trying to get the organization to act, right? So this is an organizational issue, not a personal issue. And it's, at the same time, it's about them succeeding in their career. If you can't get it in terms of them being more successful, how's that going to work? Right? I mean, if I'm working for a massive oil company and you're trying to get me to give you money, what's in it for me? I mean, no offense, but it's not my job to give away the corporation's money.
Yeah. So I think the bottom line there is, within corporations especially, it's kind of like kabuki theater.
Yeah, and email is probably still the major communication for day-to-day exchanges of information. You may use text or other short messaging sorts of things to get briefly in touch, but then it either has to go to a phone call or an email, right? Mm-hmm. So again, the email in that venue is, for establishing, well, first of all, you're trying to not be interrupted, mm-hmm. right? And you're trying to establish justification or get a letter back, right? Mm-hmm. Or create a sequence of things, create a trail mm-hmm. that allows you to look back and make sure that you're communicating consistently and meaningfully and is moving them through to action, mm-hmm. right? As opposed to the support function or the simple question answering thing.
Right. Well, I think, that you're basically making the argument that the Slack people use. They fill the slot between text and email.
Except they didn't.
Well, they said they were, but it didn't work out that way.
Well, the problem is that, like I said, different media is better for communicating different things in different ways.
Right.
And by unifying all that together, yes, they're making it more convenient. So my 10 accounts all show up at the same place. But when I respond, the response is going back into whatever venue the other person has, unless they're running Slack too. So now I'm taking a text message and pushing that in an email and taking an email and trying to deal with that in text.
Oh, you're already giving me a headache.
Well, yeah, so mismatch. This is very similar to the modal communication, right? So for example, if I'm talking to somebody with a history in the Navy, what I want to communicate, I want to use the words and the forms and the communication methodology associated with the Navy, not the Army, right? So I want to talk about boats, not tanks, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about, and there are just all sorts of sayings and other kinds of wording you might use along the way that, boy, that's a high flying idea. No, he's in the Navy. That idea will float. It's modal. Okay. The same is true because of the venue with an email. So the modes, the way you communicate, the content, the what's remembered, what's not remembered is just different in text messages than in email. Mm-hmm. So, when you mismatch modes, when they send you an email and they get back a text message in the form of an email. And then the other thing is when your messaging changes based on what you're using, you're sending inconsistent messages to them.
That's right.
So like when I'm on my cell phone, there are certain people I won't answer in that venue because even if it's an email, I really typically only answer very quickly in that venue. Now, I might sit there and, do a more in-depth email using a cell phone, but that takes 15 minutes.
Yeah.
On a cell phone, it takes, 3 or 4 minutes, and you don't have access to quoting things and dragging and dropping them in and attachments in the same way as you have when you're in your working space on your computer.
Right.
So I'll just delay that response, although I don't want it to delay, more than certainly a day. Or I can also send something back that says, I'm on the road right now. I'll send that to you in a couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And, keeping up with people's context is hard. And, it's part of the challenge of marketing is you've got to, unify that message across all of those different platforms.
Maybe, or there's also, this whole thing about tempo, right? You don't want to have an inconsistent tempo.
Right.
And people make big tempo mistakes. So I sort of have a rule for people that you're not, executing something with. If you're executing something with them, you're exchanging information at the pace of the execution. But if it's not that, you sort of don't want to send or receive more than one email in a day, right? Except for those actuarial functional things.
Right.
Right. And usually, it's at least a couple of days between when you say something and when you remind them. And then if that doesn't work, you extend it to a week and then maybe 2 weeks. And beyond 2 weeks, you're at the point where you just need to either drop the conversation or change, to a phone call. So you change venues because you want that interaction. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it fits exactly with my general philosophy of marketing, which is that, different medias have different benefits and different deficits, and you have to use them appropriately and wisely to get your message across consistently through all of them, because as you note, context is important and it's very challenging to keep up with it.
All right, now we could go into 2,500 more email examples, but unfortunately we've screwed it up and it's now 35 minutes into our 20-minute podcast.
That's right. And once again, we've talked everybody's ears off. So we're going to complete this episode of the OSG podcast. I'm Adam Gordon. He's
I'm
Dr. Fred.
There we go.
We are OSG, and we help cybersecurity companies.
We need to get that ending down pat here.
Okay, next time.
Next time, either you say it or I say it or we flip back and forth, but we need to agree.
Okay.
So we'll agree during the conversation. In fact, maybe that's what we should talk about next time.
Bye, everybody.